Chairman, and to each of you, thank you for your service, and to the men and women who work for you. It's a tough job, isn't it? And it looks like from the numbers that there's been enormous success in reducing the number of people crossing the border, but we have to put it in perspective. It's still a lot of people relative to the historical numbers. So a 64% decrease, as I read it, from May to September. That's positive. And in terms of the pressure that you all feel and the infrastructure feels that I saw when I was down there a few months ago, you know, it's better. I still don't think we quite understand what happened, although Commissioner Morgan, you talked a little about the Remain in Mexico program and how that's working. Can you tell us a little more about what you think the other factors are? And if you could give me what you think the top 3 reasons are you've seen a reduction, and in order. And then also, how has the makeup changed? We've seen reports that, as an example, that there are fewer Central Americans crossing, but more from Mexico. Is that accurate? And do they tend to be family members? I understand some are claiming asylum, so a similar fact pattern. If you could give us just a little sense of what's going on and why.
Take the latter first, so the change in demographics, so this is key. So the demographics you're spot on have changed. Again, all last year we had about 71% came from the Northern Triangle countries, and the overwhelming majority of those were families and unaccompanied minors. For the first time this year, now what we're seeing is actually Mexican nationals now are taking over a larger percentage than those individuals from Northern Triangle countries. And the specific families and unaccompanied minors numbers, those are drastically being reduced for the first time. That's a game changer. That's very important. It's the families and kids that really task our system because of the broken legal framework. To your other point is, hands down, the government of Mexico, their efforts is #1. And I would say, I would call Mexico #1 and #2 because they're really doing 2 important things. One is with the formation of the National Guard, over 25,000 troops. They've strengthened their southern border. They've strengthened the border between Mexico and the United States. They've also targeted interior enforcement operations, specifically the human smuggling routes. In fiscal year 2019, we had 213 large groups, one group of over 1,000. I believe it was in May in El Paso. Last month, we had 2. So Mexico's absolutely strengthening interior enforcement and their enforcement on both borders. The second thing is that they're supporting MPP. I think I described that. That's been a game changer as well. I'd say the third element that's really impacting is what we've done with the Northern Triangle countries. So they have joined us. They're trying to strengthen their interior enforcement as well. They're trying to increase their asylum capacity. They've worked with us and you know, other agencies sitting here to expedite the removal of their individuals through different electronic document verification and other techniques that's been able to allow us to expeditiously return those individuals. The last thing real quick that I would say is this administration. This administration that has continued to work within the current legal framework and continue to push, even although the judicial activism in the lower courts has hindered us time and time again, we're continuing to push. The asylum IFR that's out there, that's another significant initiative that we're able to use to expeditiously return individuals.
As the weather gets warmer, there are more people who tend to cross. So I'm not suggesting we don't need to have the surge capacity again. But this does give us a little breather. And one of the things that I've been concerned about going back to 2015, we first held hearings about this in one of our subcommittees, is the issue of kids and the lack of communication between ORR, the Office of Refugee Resettlement at HHS, and DHS. And my sense is that we're doing a little better now. But with this law, I would hope that we can do a better job of providing information about these children to, you know, ORR with 2 goals. One is just understand what's happening with these kids, where they are, why they're where they are. These are children. But second, to get them reunited with their families. And I think it's in everybody's interest, by the way, including the administration, given what happened at a time when there was this surge and we kind of lost kids. Can you tell us where we are on that in terms of providing information? You mentioned MPP earlier. Same issue. You know, if you come over as a family unit and the kids get separated, some are in the United States, the kids, and the parents are in Mexico. How are we doing there to provide that information? Again, I think this is something that's in everybody's interest, including the children.
So I'll turn to my colleagues on the former question about the OR issue, but specifically the MPP. So we would not return an individual like a parent to Mexico and keep the child. So if we decide to separate based on a specific criteria, like for example, the parent is a convicted murderer, rapist, et cetera, of a violent crime, yes, for the safety of the child, we would separate that child from the parent, but the child then would be provided to HSS OR, and then we would keep the parent in our process in the United States.
Okay. Well, we'll follow up on that because I do have some additional questions because we're hearing some other things about MVP and separation. I want to be sure we understand it well. To the drug issue. I mean, this is, as Director Benner said, I think accurately, we're all border states. I mean, Ohio is hit hard with crystal meth right now, as an example, and it's coming from one place. It's coming from Mexico. We were already hit hard with opioids coming over, primarily heroin. Now we see more fentanyl coming. It used to be almost exclusively from China through our mail system into our communities. Now we see it coming through Mexico. The cartels are very involved in this, a lot of money in it. As the number of crossings has gone down, we get a sense that the drug flow has not. I asked this question of Undersecretary Glau last week. We did our annual Threats to the Homeland hearing, and we had the right people there to talk about what was happening in the interior of the United States in terms of the drug threat. He indicated that even though there is a 64% decrease in people coming across, that there's not a decrease, in fact, an increase in the flow of drugs. Is that accurate?
Yes, Senator, that is accurate, and I'll tell you what our concern is right now is the number of seizures of fentanyl from China are way down, so coming through the small quantities coming through the mail facilities, but HSI seized over 1,000 pounds more fentanyl in 19 than we did in 18. That delta, that increase, is Mexico. The Mexican cartels have jumped into that fentanyl space. My concern is that the trend of the super labs, which we've seen with the methamphetamine phenomenon for 3 years now, is that the fentanyl problem translates into the same super lab problem that we're facing with methamphetamine. So
now let me just, I know my time's expiring here, but what do you mean by that precise? I think everybody would be interested, because for us to address this issue properly, we've got to understand it better. And I hear different things from different law enforcement individuals, but it seems to me you're right, the STOP Act and other things have helped us with regard to the mail. In other words, this deadliest drug, fentanyl, which kills more people by overdoses than any other drug, all drugs combined, in fact. But with Mexico, it's going, as I understand it, primarily from China to Mexico. It's not being produced in Mexico at this point. There were 2 labs you all, I think, had shut down with the Mexican authorities. But it's being processed there, often into pills. Is that accurate?
yes, and so what we saw, for example, sir, in Ohio was the domestic pill press operations where an individual orders relatively pure fentanyl from China through the dark web. They produce pills that were killing people.
Right.
What we're seeing now is the precursor chemicals to make fentanyl essentially going from China to Mexico, where it's being processed and assembled in Mexico in bulk. So the number of seizures, incidents has gone down, but the amounts and the weights have gone up. So we're seeing bigger shipments, bigger capacity, better quality, higher purity, and much more productivity.
Yeah.
And so it's really manufacturing 101. I mean, this is a supply chain kind of economy, and we can apply the same lessons and the same rules.
Dr. Benner, my time's expiring. I'd love to follow up with you on this. We met with the Mexican ambassador last week about this and talked about a trilateral approach here, China, Mexico, the United States, because you still have this flow, as you said, coming in from China. Can you follow up with me on that and see how we can better target the cartels and the real problem here?
Absolutely, and as you know, HSI opened an office in Dayton and Toledo. We doubled our footprint in Ohio to combat both the meth and...
We thank you for that.
So we look forward to getting together.
Thank you.
So I just want